This podcast is at least 10 years in the making.
So our family was one of the families that had a court case in our state to make homeschooling laws there what they were.
The more homeschoolers there are, the bigger target we are. And so this space has to be filled.
But I was like, no, I mean, how do you feel about talking about homeschooling every single day for the rest of your life?
We're going to tell you in advance, this is what's happening. This is what we're hearing in the Capitol. This is who you need to contact. Here's their phone number.
I believe homeschooling is part of how we're going to save this country.
Well, hi, you guys. Thank you for joining us on the first ever podcast for the Homeschool Freedom Coalition. We are so excited that you're here. We're excited to be here. We are your hosts for today's episode. Emily, can you kind of start us off? Give us a little bit of a background, who you are, what we do, why we care about this topic?
Sure. The Homeschool Freedom Coalition is essentially an organization, and this podcast is going to help homeschoolers become more involved in legislative politics. And I'm the executive director here. I was hired for this job about a year and a half ago. My background is that I was homeschooled my whole life. I'm one of 11 kids. All of us were homeschooled. I got my degree in Christian education. I then went on to work at a homeschool curriculum company for 10 years, just 3 months short of 10 years, and helped thousands of families start homeschooling. So homeschooling has always been extremely important to me, very near and dear to my heart. So this podcast is an extension of my very deep love of homeschooling and my desire to see homeschoolers become more respected and more effective in the political realm going forward.
Yeah. So I was also homeschooled. If you don't know, Emily and I are sisters. I also shared 10 siblings. And I was homeschooled K through 12 as well. Went on to work at that same company. It's one of the largest curriculum companies in the world. So I like I said, I was homeschooled. I loved being homeschooled, all the things. But I didn't really love homeschooling until I started working in that world. So a lot of my job was to take somebody who's brand new, they haven't homeschooled before, their kids having trouble, and to help them, figure out the learning styles, get the right curriculum, get them actually set up in that world. And so it was always important to me that those families don't just buy curriculum this year. We want those people to homeschool forever. We want this curriculum to work. And if it doesn't, we have to find the other thing that does, So that burned a love of homeschooling into my soul. I cared about it way more after those, the number of years I worked for the company. So now that I'm a mom, it's even more important than it ever was before. I don't know where you're from, but I live in Minnesota. And so we are constantly under some kind of attack in this state, whether it's homeschooling.
You've got Tim Waltz. I mean, yes. that's not, I wouldn't call him a homeschool champion.
Well, and you can all be very grateful that he's not our vice president today for the entire country, because we do not.
I mean, I know this is a tangent, but I saw he's doing a 60 Minutes interview about what's going on with all the fraud in your state, Mr. Waltz. And
we have no idea.
Yeah, it's like that would never have come to light if he was sitting in DC right now. Right. But anyway, move on. Let's keep going.
No, it's just, I will say something that this podcast is at least 10 years in the making. We both care about this topic a lot. We've both worked in this space for a number of years, and we see problems that are facing the homeschooling world, especially post-COVID. Everybody thought, okay, 2020 is going to be a big year. All these numbers are going to drop back down, kind of level out. That hasn't happened. Homeschooling has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger since COVID. And so what happens is, now that there are millions of more homeschoolers, we have a much bigger target on our back. Homeschool parents, homeschool students. The government's not going to, just watch millions of students walk away from their broken system and say, okay, go ahead, you do your thing. Like that's not going to happen. So that's a big part of why we exist.
I think that's a point that, there's two sides. It's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, it's fantastic that homeschooling is growing. It's fantastic that millions of kids are getting away from that system and getting a real education, real connection and relationship with their parents. On the other hand, the more kids that do that, the more likely we are to face regulation, legislation. And, so we're over 10 years apart in age, you and I. I remember so our family was one of the families that had a court case in our state to make homeschooling laws there what they were. So we knew all these original pioneer families. We were one of these pioneer families that made homeschooling legal in our state. And we knew the people from Nebraska. We knew the people from the states around us that were also the pioneer families. And I can tell you, all anyone wanted for all of the 90s, most of the 2000s to 2010 was just to be left alone. Homeschoolers wanted to draw no attention, to be totally ignored. We don't want the government's help. We don't want the government to talk to us. We want nothing to do. Just leave us alone. Well, the boost in numbers after COVID, and I mean, we could put a timestamp on COVID, but it's really a culmination of 20 other things. COVID's an easy one to put a pin on a calendar, but really it's, the rise of cell phones in classrooms and the rise of social media allowing stories to get out and things like that. Those are all accumulated at the same time into, okay, is it possible? And that's a big part of what this podcast is going to cover week after week is I believe, and I know you believe as well, Madelyn, that it is not possible anymore for homeschoolers to fly under the radar and draw no attention and just be ignored and just be left alone. We represent millions of students now. There's over 3 million. And honestly, I mean, I really respect Dr. Brian Ray at the National Home Education Research Institute, who came up with that number. He's done peer-reviewed studies on homeschooling. But I think that number is low. I think it's really low because there are states like Texas where I live, so just as a side note, you should pray for Madelyn because she lives in Minnesota and I get to live in Texas. But there are states like Texas that don't require any reporting whatsoever on homeschooling. My family has never been enrolled in a public school to show an unenrollment, right? So it's like, I think that number is low. And I think in 5 years, it's going to double. I mean, maybe 10 max, but I think so. This podcast is coming about, and the purpose of this whole organization is to help homeschoolers be ready for the fights that are coming that have never faced homeschoolers before. And they're going to come fast. They're going to come very quickly because with the passage of school choice in all these big red states, the numbers of kids leaving is going to skyrocket. And like Madelyn said, that's a target on everyone's back. Like, when you're representing 5, 8, 10% of students, you represent 5, 8, 10% of the funding. And they're not going to let 10% of their funding walk out the door without, let's pass a law that says, if you want to homeschool, you have to dual enroll your student. Or let's pass a law that says you have to do all the same paperwork requirements. Well, then how hard does homeschooling become? Twice as hard.
Right.
So people, they just leave their kids in,
Well, and I think something that happens is, people pull their kids out. They're realizing that, this is a problem. They know that bad bills are being passed in state legislatures. They know the stuff's going on. But homeschool parents are busy. Parents in general are busy. And so in my corner of the world, what usually happens is a bad bill is introduced, something that tracks, traces, documents homeschoolers. There are some bills, like in New Jersey, for instance, where you have to have a government official come interview your kids, every year to make sure that you can homeschool. So those things happen. Those bills get dropped.
I think they call that a wellness check. So who only knows what a wellness check with a government employee entails. But anyway.
Right. Let's just see where this goes. Right. So you have these bills drop, and then all the moms and all of our co-ops and all of our churches, our mom groups, everybody rallies together and shows up at state capitals.
Alert.
Right. We show up in Austin or Olympia or Jefferson City or Des Moines, and everybody pushes. There's a big rally. There's social media posts. There's, news coverage. And then we go home.
Right.
And then politicians don't hear from us for the next 11 months out of the year. There's a big push, and then they don't see homeschoolers as a threat after that day. When all the big vans with 5, 6, 8 kids pack up and everybody heads home, they go, okay, well, we've glad-handed enough. We've shook some hands. We've shown some concern. And then they don't don't respect us. They don't fear us. And so in the absence of that respect, they just do what they want to do.
And we're going to do anyway.
Yeah. And again, like you said, the more homeschoolers there are, the bigger target we are. And so this space has to be filled. We can't sit back and go, we all showed up that day. And sometimes that is what needs to happen. Don't get me wrong. That does need to happen. We'll probably ask you to do that that will definitely happen. But we can't be silent for the rest of the year because these things grow in the weeds. They grow in the dark. They grow in the off season when politicians are meeting and having.
They grow in the primary season. They grow in the primaries.
Exactly.
They grow when who is filling the chair and filing the bills is decided to, months earlier in the primaries. And if we're not involved in that process all over the place in our states, we don't have a say. And we're going to do a whole series, Madelyn and I, on how politics really works. For some context, both of us have worked I've worked 7 years in nonprofit conservative politics, the Second Amendment, pro-life, this space. So we have a deep understanding, a very, very hands-on understanding of how politics really works. And I think I wanted to touch back on something you just said, Maddie, where you talked about we show up at the Capitol, they take their pictures with us, they take their baked goods, the pies and the whatever, the things that we do to make them see we're nice people, we're good people, we're not a threat, we're doing a good job, our kids are doing better than those radical kids that think they're furries at government schools. See, you have to recognize that this is a pressure game. And what happened there is we all showed up for one day and put pressure. I mean, just social pressure at that point, not really strong political pressure, but social pressure on these legislators. Recognize that as homeschooling grows, they're going to face very, very, very real political pressure from teachers' unions, the NEA, every single well-funded radical cause that doesn't like to see hundreds of thousands, if not millions and millions of kids leaving the school system. They're going to put real political pressure on these people. They're not going to show up for a photo op. They're not going to show up with baked goods. They're going to send their lobby in a $5,000 suit into their office and tell them, I'm going to alert every government school employee, every government school vendor, every government school, anybody in your district, and tell them that you're bad and you shouldn't be voted for. So you're going to pass the bill I want you to pass. And the guy's going to go, or gal, these sweet homeschoolers or this really effective political lobby with lots of money and a really like a killer program that they know exactly how to weaponize to use against me at election time. And he's going to go, and we've seen it over and over and over. They're going to go, I think I can fool the homeschoolers. I think I can tell them it was a tough year. This wasn't the right time.
Pray for me.
Really didn't. What's that?
Pray for me,
Oh yeah,
you would for me, brother.
I'm under here. It's please come into my prayer closet and pray with me. You wouldn't believe how nasty it is here in the Capitol. They know they can snowball the homeschoolers easier and faster than they can ever get away with snowballing the entire lobby infrastructure of government education. That's super well funded, super effective. And so I hope this podcast, even just this first one, is starting to show homeschoolers, the size of the fights that are coming. Okay. As homeschooling grows, the fights are going to get bigger and more often. And the failure of the tactic of every summer, every legislative session, we have to gather every homeschooler and throw ourselves on the rocks of Capitol Day and basically beg these people, especially in states like Illinois, Virginia, New Jersey, we don't have a position of power or strength. So we're basically trying to show them with our baked goods and our peace offerings, please don't step on us. That has got to change. And that is why the Homeschool Freedom exists. And that's why this podcast exists, is we are going to pull the doors back on, open the curtain, who's the man behind the curtain? How does politics really work? What do homeschoolers need to do to be respected and feared instead of coddled? And it's so enraging to me, like on a deep level, to watch homeschoolers be just patted on the head, like a parent, like, come here, bud, pat him on the head, pat him on the butt, out the door. It's like, I have been in state capitals. I have watched this happen as they're not respected. They don't fight effectively in the legislative system, and we've got to change it, and we've got to change it quick. And so that's why we're here.
Well, and that's the other thing, is that a lot of times, when a bill is dropped, or when somebody's voting on something, or when a really bad bill is passed, everybody's asking, who did this? What happened? Who voted for it? I can see the bill sponsor easily enough. How did this happen? And so, because we don't work for any of those people, we work for you, we work for our members, we're able to say, this is what happened. Here's who voted for it. Here's who sponsored it. Here's who put the pressure on who. And so that makes you, me, homeschoolers, all of us, so much more effective, because instead of going, well, how did this happen? We can go, this is what's happening. Do something now. Right. Call XYZ senator, send the pre-written emails that we've got set up to your state rep, and blast this everywhere. And so that's the big thing, is we don't have to wait until a bad thing is already, halfway over to actually put some pressure on. We're going to tell you in advance, this is what's happening. This is what we're hearing in the Capitol. This is who you need to contact. Here's their phone number. So we want to take a lot of that guesswork out. We don't want you guys to, again, people are busy. They don't have time to just sit around and be politicos. And they're much more interesting podcasts to listen to 10 hours a day than this bad person's doing this. We're going to simplify all of that for you. And we're going to make it so you know exactly what's happening in your state, and you can take action against it.
And ultimately, tagging directly onto that, we want to put the power of influencing the legislature back on the people, and the moms and the dads and the taxpayers and the homeschool, the parents that are doing the work of homeschooling. And so historically, the way conservative politics has worked for decades, and I would just right at the outset point out that we've largely failed all the way this whole time. My entire life has been losing ground using these tactics. So just out the front door, say this doesn't work, but this is what conservatives have historically done. They've historically said, me and my organization, we 5 people, we will represent your interests to the guys in the big building, right? We're the elite amongst you who will be chosen to represent you to the powerful people in the big scary building at the Capitol. And you guys just send us your money, and you guys just send us your donations, and we'll protect you. And this goes for every conservative topic. Okay. Pro-life, Second Amendment, taxes, everything, and homeschooling. And so what happens is we continue to lose by doing that. Okay. On every one of those social issues, on every one of those cultural issues, we've continued to lose ground because our 5 or 6 guys or gals are not as scary as the better funded, more aggressive, whatever you want to call it, on the other side of that issue. Okay. And so we have to stop consolidating our power into 5 or 6 people and hoping that they're scarier than the 5 or 6 people the other team's sending in. We need to put the power back in the hands of the people. And each of these legislators in all these state capitals need to be hearing from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families in their district every day until they do what we want them to do. That's the only way we can beat the 5 much better funded, much more aggressive, much smoother, much slicker. They have bigger sticks to beat them with, and they have bigger carrots to hand them than we do. And so this is essential that we move away from the model that we've been following historically. And this isn't just homeschooling. Again, if you see this happening in other conservative issues, please take note and look around and see that it's not working, and see that the other side advancing their cause, they're not following that tactic, and that's why they're winning.
Well, and we have a good lineup of a lot of speakers, the people we find interesting, the people that we know are kind of speaking into this space. And I think it's important too that we not just welcome in, but all those people that have started homeschooling in the last 5 years. So if you weren't raised in the homeschooling world in the 90s, that's okay. We need to take all of these people and give them a voice and show them what's happening, show them how to defend homeschooling. And so that's what we're very excited to do with this podcast. And like I said, we have a whole host of people that we want to bring on the show that we know are going to have a lot of different information, things that are helpful for you. So we hope that you will like, subscribe, share, all the things, because we're going to have videos for you every week. And we are just again, very, very grateful to have you here with us on the ride.
Yeah. No, I'm excited. This has been, when Madelyn said it was 10 years in the making here, she's absolutely right. I sat down more than 10 years ago, and it's funny. Everyone, when I was dating, before, I've been married 11 years now, but when I was dating, as a homeschooler already, this is when, we had like Vadi Bakum and others were putting out books on who to look for in a husband and leadership and all this. I would always ask, so how do you feel about homeschooling? And of course, if they didn't think homeschooling was great, I was like, okay, I'm out. But I was like, no, I mean, how do you feel about talking about homeschooling every single day for the rest of your life? Because it's that important to me, and it's that important. I think, I want to say, when I worked at the homeschool company, I wanted to save those kids, right? I wanted to help individual families with their individual students get out of the system and start homeschooling. Now I care about homeschooling, even now that I'm a parent. I care about it even more for that reason, for my own children, but also because I believe homeschooling is part of how we're going to save this country. And I'm very excited to have this podcast launching in a time where Donald Trump has dismantled the Department of Education and school choice is passing all over the country. And homeschooling is on this cusp of something incredible stuff we've prayed about and dreamed about. And right at this exact moment, everything came together that the Homeschool Freedom Coalition could step onto the scene and teach homeschoolers a new way to do politics, a new way to be effective. My husband and I can't see it as anything but the hand of God. I just see it as God wanted this to happen, when it's happening, how it's happening, with the people involved. I can't tell you how excited I am about all of this, about the future of homeschooling, about this podcast, and about what homeschoolers are going to accomplish in the coming years. I'm excited.
Yeah, we hope you join us. We hope you follow us, and we'll have more for you coming next week.